Words for meditation this morning come from former colleague of mine on Long Island. She's former minister of the South Nassau UU congregation. In the spirit of community and a sense of purpose in our ministry, let us commence the discovery of our strengths, our concerns, our grief, and our joy. Let this journey be one of love, authenticity, and reverence. Let us shape our lives, our work, and our days as an expression of that joy, that love, and of our commitment to service and to each other. Let us enter together into a moment of silence. And amen. In my experience, many Unitarian Universalists have some difficulty with the word sermon. This presentation that I am just now starting for many UUs is not a sermon at all. These folks feel compelled to call it something else. Your talk today was certainly very interesting, but, or that lecture was okay, except for, don't forget, I'm talking about UUs, folks who regularly take issue with what they hear from the pulpit or lectern. Whatever this speech is, they object to calling it a sermon. Sermon. The word feels like it belongs in a more traditional theological setting. It's a directive kind of speech, often a haranguing about what you need to do to achieve salvation. And of course, the Universalist side of our house tells us that we don't need to worry about that. At any rate, many UUs like to call this part of the Sunday service something other than the sermon. Presentation, lecture, message, commentary, or perhaps diatribe. And as I've been thinking about my sermon today, I've realized that what I want to say may very well in large part not be a sermon at all, at least as how I think about sermons. In fact, you might say this is going to be more like a report. No, not a book report a la 7th grade, but a report about our journey together. It's been brief, to be sure, but I think we have made progress and more is on the way. So I concluded that I ought to share my thoughts about this journey in spite of its brevity. For me, our journey together began about a year ago. Your worship chair, Diana Stevens, and I sort of found each other. And I began doing regular Zoom services with you. Joe Adlis skillfully put together recorded segments. And so we produced worship services. Over the months, others became involved in producing services. But all the time, COVID threatened. The pandemic forced us into doing church in what continues to seem not exactly like church. Certainly not like we knew it not that long ago. It's been going on for more than a year and a half now, and God knows that we are getting tired of it. It has not been easy, and this and many other UU congregations have suffered. Flaws were beginning to appear in our capability of being in community with one another. At the same time, this congregation was struggling to work through a period of turmoil that predated the pandemic. Beloved people left the church community. The stalwarts who remained did not know exactly what to do, but there was a realization that some sort of action or intervention was needed. The congregation engaged Dr. Sid Sharrow, highly qualified social worker and organizational development expert. Her charge was, in part, to lead some training of some sort with the congregation so as to develop group communication skills. In early 2021, I was brought in on a consulting basis with the charge of sort of bringing a pastoral dimension to these efforts. As plans emerged for the 3 workshops that Sid proposed, I realized that more would be necessary to encourage the transformation and healing that the church needed in order to move ahead. Specifically, I came to the conclusion that a program built around small group conversations would likely benefit the UUCT community in its effort to come to terms with the past and begin to turn seriously to the future. The combined effects of past turmoil and the lingering COVID pandemic have made for rather serious difficulties. How's that for an understatement? Clearly, we need to let go of the question, what's wrong? And instead begin to ask, what's possible? With encouragement from several congregational leaders, I decided to attend the virtual Unitarian Universalist General Assembly this past June. It was my first GA in about 10 years. Knowing that there are always GA workshops that deal with conflict resolution, I hunted through the program in search of them. I virtually attended several promising ones and concluded that the Restorative Circles workshop led by a UU from New Hampshire, a woman named Sarah Elizabeth Anderson, was most promising. She was offering a 6-week online class to train restorative circle facilitators, and I signed up for it. The strategy intentionally uses the healthy communications techniques that Sid Sharrow addressed in the 3 workshops that she led with UUCT earlier this year. The Restorative Circles approach presents, in my thinking, a ready-made strategy for pursuing the kinds of small group conversations that I believe can benefit this congregation immensely. We don't really have time this morning to go into great detail about the conduct of circles, but I'll share a few things about them. Of course, people meet in small groups, say 6 to 8, typically arranged in a circle so as to promote a sense of equal status. Everyone is there voluntarily, and the whole approach has been used successfully in conflict resolution in many UU congregations. The facilitator invites someone, usually the community member who asked for the circle, to share what is on their mind and to direct their comments to a specific person in the circle. This second person listens responsively. When the first person finishes, the listener repeats back in their own words the thoughts and feelings that the first person expressed. If they are not quite correct, the original speaker shares more, and that person and the listener go back and forth until full understanding is reached. You probably recall from the Cicero workshops that a way for people who are in conversation to make sure that they are truly hearing one another is to repeat back what they hear from the other person. The Restorative Circles approach makes this process an intentional part of the circle conversation. Making sure that one's thoughts and feelings are truly heard by participants is built into the process. Now, if you'd like to find out more about how circles are set up and how they work, I recommend viewing the recorded Restorative Circles workshops that were presented at GA in both 2020 and 2021. You'll find these and many other links if you go to the UU Association website and search for Restorative Circles. Or you can email me and I'll post the specific links. Or you can email me and I'll back to you or to the UU listserv. If you broaden your searching, you'll find that very similar techniques go by names such as justice circles, restorative justice circles, or peacemaking circles, or some similar names. Many slightly different techniques are, in fact, out there. So after I completed the facilitator training course, I talked it up with UUCT's Healthy Relations team, the committee that worked with Cicero on the congregational communications workshops. I encouraged them to watch the videos recorded at GA in both 2020 and 2021. And I'm pleased to say that 4 of the team have signed up for the facilitators class that begins in January 2022. And I also know that 2 more UUCT members are also interested in attending. My hope is that this core of people can provide the church with meaningful, effective ways to address conflict, both past and future. With their help, what's wrong can indeed become what's possible. One very important proponent of small group conversations has been the prolific author Margaret Wheatley. Her books, Leadership and the New Science and Turning to One Another, have inspired my thinking over the years about the importance of conversation. I would be remiss if I did not introduce some of her thoughts about the realm of small group interaction. One of the troubling facts about our recent experience, not just in church, but in the wider community too, is our isolation. Of course, the isolation has been even more troubling for people who live alone. This became a problem in this church several years ago when healthy communications among people or groups suffered within the congregation. But you know, we humans don't really want to be entirely left alone. This is true even among our most introverted members of this religious community. But then this pandemic came along, and becoming even more isolated was necessary for our very survival. I really appreciate the wisdom of Margaret Wheatley on this topic of isolation. She writes, "We at frantic speed spinning out into greater isolation. We seek consolation in everything except each other. The entire world seems hypnotized in the wrong direction, encouraging us to love things rather than people, to embrace everything new without noticing what's lost or wrong, to choose fear instead of peace. We promise ourselves everything except each other." Now, we yearn for community, but we turn away from each other. Yet on some level, we know that we need each other if we are to find our way through the darkness. Wheatley's hypothesis is that the simplest way for us to find each other again is talk. About what, you ask? We need to talk about what we care about. And of course, I would add that it's essential that we listen attentively to one another. Half, or maybe more, of communicating is listening. No one of us has all the answers, all the vision needed to bring us together, to banish the isolation. But each of us can contribute in meaningful ways to end the separation. Ms. Wheatley points out that conversation takes time. Time we need to spend sitting together, sharing. We need to overcome the fear of those we believe are opposed to us. Notably, she believes we all have people whom we fear or with whom we are angry. We have trouble imagining healthy conversations with them. But very often, we can have them. And my added belief here is that restorative circles can indeed facilitate such healthy conversations between or among people who don't see eye to eye. From their listening to us and our listening to them, we turn toward one another, in Wheatley's view. And what will we accomplish through this process? She believes it goes a long way toward getting past that question I've raised, what's wrong, and getting to our asking instead, what's possible. Ms. Wheatley shares many other valuable insights about the human condition. One that we need to heed is that nothing exists in isolation. Everything is relative to everything else. In my view, Isaac Newton did something of a disservice to us. His second law states that a body at rest tends to remain so, and a body in motion tends to remain so too. But a body at rest, now a stone out in the parking lot may be at rest with respect to nearby stones, but from the vantage point of the moon, say, it's in motion, along with everything else on the Earth's surface. That everything is relative is, to me, a sort of almost a radical version of our seventh principle, the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. In more human terms, Wheatley asserts that, I quote, "We only isolate ourselves when we're hurt by others, but alone is not a natural state," unquote. In other words, choosing up sides and thereby separating ourselves is unnatural. Rather, making a true connection with others is something that brings joy to humans. Now, is hope the answer? She points out that hope is not the cure for despair. Instead, finding out that we care about many of the same things that others care about, and agreeing that we need to do something about these valued things is what cures despair. Indeed, getting to what's possible is what I see as our greatest challenge in the days ahead. Together, we can make progress toward this goal in community with one another. May it be so, and amen. This congregation is supported financially by its members and friends, and I invite you to contribute in this offertory moment. You can go to the church website at uutampa.org and click on the donation link on that homepage and make your offering. And of course, mailed in checks work very nicely too. And the congregation appreciates your support. Extinguish the chalice. This is Benediction for a People in Pandemic by Anya Samler-Michael. When faced with a challenge such as this, we can turn toward one another, or we can turn against. We can ignore the cries of our neighbors, or we can let them cry into the arms of our witness. We can respond with indifference to systemic injustice, or we can commit to undoing. Good souls, tales will be told of how we responded when this particular hell has visited upon our earth. Let us know, and let it be said by generations to come, that when the pain of our separation was revealed, we moved closer to the promised land of our beloved community. And amen. Our closing song. Shalom, my friends.